Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And today, we're going to be talking about Ripple and XRP, as well as the vast majority of crypto and finance. And with that being said, hope that you were all having a beautiful day or a beautiful night wherever you guys are out there in the world. So do you guys remember this post that I included in a video recently talking about Swift and talking about Ripple and XRP? It's from Wrath of Kahneman. This is when Swift put out a report talking about this shared ledger for payment data using blockchain technology. They suggest that their transaction manager, they discuss the benefits of DVP. It's heavy stuff. The discussion is sure to raise lots of questions for XRP Ledger and Ripple fans because this is a platform that will enhance the shared ledger proposition by offering a payload of rich and structured data to fulfill the adjacent functions that are essential to the completion of any regulated financial transaction in an instant and frictionless way. But the problem is, right, is where is their settlement and where is their clearing layer coming from? Because Swift at the end of the day is just messaging. That's all it is, right? And I feel as though when we think about that, right, when we have something that is ISO 20022 based, and it is a messaging layer, where does the settlement and clearing layer come from? And it has to be ISO 20022 based. What is the first DLT based player that is built out on blockchain technology? It's Ripple. Remember, I've talked about this. Ripple is one of the first major members of the ISO 20022 committee that is based on blockchain. When we think about that, right, they were at the forefront. They already have a foot through the door. So does that mean that Swift will use Ripple? We can't say for certain. But recently, the Digital Pound Foundation put out this, which is Swift connects over 11,500 banks and financial institutions across more than 200 countries, facilitating the daily transfer of trillions of dollars. Their new CBDC platform aims to provide a unified global connection point for digital asset payments. Now, everyone is a little bit overreacting to this. You know, they're talking a little bit about, Hedera, Quant, Ripple, things like that. A lot of people will say like, oh, well, this is replacing Ripple and XRP. I think that far too many people forget that a lot of these platforms in this space, whether it be Quant with Overledger, whether it be RippleNet, it could all be white labeled, which means Swift could launch something like this and it could actually be built out on RippleNet. We just don't know. Now, is that a little bit of a stretch? 100%. But when we look into this, right, we have in a significant development for the global banking sector, Swift, the international banking communications network, has announced plans to launch a new platform within the next 12 to 24 months. This platform aims to integrate the emerging central bank digital currencies with the current financial system. The initiative underscores the rapidly growing interest in digital currencies among the world's central banks, which are seeking to adapt to the digital age. So this is definitely interesting. It comes at a very substantial time, and we also have down here from the head of innovation, he's highlighting the extensive collaboration involved in the network's latest trial. The 6-month project brought together a diverse group of 38 central banks, commercial banks, and settlement platforms. Now, what are these settlement platforms? That's the thing that we really need to look at, right? Because everyone will say, oh, well, that's it. Ripple's dead. Guys, do you remember that the head of payments at Swift, Citi, and Ripple were all in the same, they were all in the same podcast talking about the new rails for the new world? They could be one of these settlement platforms. We have this trial, one of the largest of its kind, on CBDCs and tokenized assets, aimed to ensure the interoperability of various national and digital currencies regardless of the underlying technologies they use. Such interoperability is critical for reducing the risk of fragmentation in global payment systems. So this is definitely something that we need to watch for, and everyone is going to make an assumption saying, oh, well, this is replacing Ripple. Ripple is replaced. I don't think so. In fact, big shout to Smoke Dog for this. We have, pay attention, Swift's new strategy involves instant and frictionless payments to 4 billion accounts using agnostic standards. Ripple equals currency agnostic. Ripple emerging standards like ISO 20022. Swift CBDC platform uses ISO 20022 blockchain-based messages. And here we have, from 2021, Swift Accenture published joint paper on CBDCs and cross-border payments. We have at the bottom there, Swift's evolving platform and renewed focus on transaction management services under its new strategy to enable instant frictionless payments across 4 billion accounts globally, agnostic of standards, technologies, and currencies, could interact with the cross-border use of CBDCs. In collaboration with the community, SWIFT intends to explore its role further, both as a carrier of authenticated information about CBDC transactions, as it does today for fiat currencies, and as a carrier of actual CBDC value in whatever form it is issued, which is very interesting. Over here, we have adoption central banks continued, and this is where XRP comes into play. Central banks to have discussed the integration of Ripple and XRP include, and here are those areas. Hard to imagine why value isn't fully translated yet. And over here, we have Wither central banks, together with Ripple, a currency-agnostic P2P payments system to facilitate low-cost payments. Very interesting. And also over here we have, and let me open this up in a new tab just so you guys can see what I'm reading, Ripple to use emerging industry standards, ISO 20022, and open source technology so that it can be easily integrated into domestic solutions. We also have down here as a payment rail, Ripple is agnostic to payment type. Then back over here on the last slide, again, at the core of our solution is the DLT and smart contract layer, which maintains consistent records of transactions. And at the bottom there, you have ISO 20022 and signed blockchain message. And this is the overall transaction manager simulation. This is the Swift CBDC sandbox project. Very interesting. But overall, DLT and smart contracts are at the forefront of this. Now, again, everyone will make the assumption that, oh, Ripple and XRP are being replaced here. It couldn't be anything further from the truth. Over here, we also have from Smokedog, ask yourself, why would Swift cite Ripple and XRP specifically in two different documents about improving cross-border payments if using Ripple's technology wasn't in the plans? Even a UC Berkeley video confirmed the doc was legit. You have to look closely to understand. And here we actually have from Swift, this is a Swift document, context, bank disintermediation. We have the local bank platform area where Ripple is a big player of. And this is all back-end technology. On the last slide there, you have settlement on Corda, this is the transfer of funds on Corda. Swift GPI is at the center, and then on the bottom, cryptocurrency, this is XRP, and this is all how to settle on Corda. Now, okay, over here is the video from UC Berkeley. Listen closely to this video as it does address Ripple and XRP.
Okay, so look, Western Union isn't going to go out of business anytime soon. They're going to adopt different technologies. Okay. But this is where the big money is. It's not in remittances. It's in these business-to-business payments across border. And that's why we have these kinds of companies like Ripple and Stellar. This is all about, right, business-to-business, back-end, big volume transactions, which are currently, very expensive. So if we look at the payment system, they're not sitting at the, you're sending money back to your uncle, right? It is, right, at the bank level. So the banks are making transactions with other banks. Now, nothing's changed here. You're still doing something like correspondent banking, except now, because the data can move around more quickly than the money moves around, right? We can settle these things more quickly. So the difference between a Bitcoin and a Ripple, in a nutshell, again, not too much time to elaborate, is that what Bitcoin uses is an open, permissionless, distributed ledger system, right, where anybody can jump in and do a transaction. Right, that's kind of the beauty of it. I can go buy Bitcoin, you can go buy Bitcoin. We don't need to ask anybody's permission, and there's no middleman that can, accept or deny, approve or reject. It's distributed, the consensus around validating these transactions. What's different about systems like Ripple and most of the blockchain systems that will prevail is that they are permissioned, meaning that you have to be, a member, and membership has its privileges. And so you have these different nodes, and the nodes basically know one another, okay? And then if I want to give money to my uncle back in France, let's say, then I have to go to one of these banks that are a member of the Ripple network, and then my uncle will go to one of these banks that's a member of the Ripple network, and then those banks will do their transacting through this distributed ledger.
So you guys have it, and this is a complete breakdown of how things are changing around this new DLT-based payment system. Now, regardless of if you think it's Ripple, regardless of if you think it's XRP, things are changing rapidly. And one of the only companies in this space, and I will mention this a million times over, the only company in this space that really has these types of mentions, the documents tied to it, are really just Ripple and Stellar. But we know Stellar is not focused on B2B. They're more so focused on P2P. Ripple is focused fully on B2B. And this is where XRP and XLM, in my opinion, become very large players for the global financial system. Over here, we also have the Bank of International Settlements discussing how a third-party currency with sufficient liquidity is needed for cross-border payments. The BIS brought on Ripple for the CPMI group around cross-border payments, and guess who else is on that list? Swift. Why would two competitors be on that list? They wouldn't. They're all working together. Swift is working with Ripple. That document, the CPMI group from the BIS, the Central Bank of Central Banks, confirms that Swift is working with Ripple. I'm sorry to say that, but anybody out there that is looking at that list and saying, oh, they're still competing, Swift is replacing Ripple, it's ridiculous. Large technology players will come together to build the Web3 world of the Internet of Value. Just like Web 2 was not just, hey, look at Amazon's competing with Microsoft, which was ridiculous, or hey, Microsoft's, competing with Apple. All of these companies, every single company that has built the Web 2 world, right? These are very greedy corporations. Realistically speaking, a lot of them are competing with each other in terms of specific products. If you will, a great example of this is Sony with like the PlayStation and Microsoft with the Xbox, right? But when we think about technology and we're looking at crypto, a lot of people look at crypto as, oh, well, these are currencies. I could buy pizza with XRP, right? You could, but that's not the underlying core value. There will be people in this space that will say, oh, XRP is built for all these great use cases. And although, yes, it is technically speaking, the biggest use case here is what's happening behind the scene with all of these big groups like the BIS, Swift, the DTCC, institutions now coming into the space. Like, realistically speaking, what's happening right now is the rise of the tokenized economy. And it's all kind of ushering us into the digital age of the financial system as well. But that's when we look at the Web 3 world versus the Web 2 world, where Web 2 companies, although they shifted and they morphed into the Web 2 world initially from Web 1, they also are corporations that are competing with each other. This space is completely different, right? Where you have all of these companies, you have all of these great technologies, and the small majority of them that are actually compliant, that are actually, utility based, they're building out the Web3 world. They are building the Internet of Value. Ripple was one of the forefront players of this. In a world where everyone was looking at Bitcoin replacing the fiat system in a decentralized way where nobody can control you, that was really just a dream. Now we really look at what's really going on. And then you look at the connections with Ripple. You look at the connections with Stellar. You look at the connections even with Hedera and Quant. And now you're starting to see the much larger picture, which is central banks, institutions, they are talking to these companies and they're saying, hey, we know you have this technology behind you. We know that you have these successful use cases and pilots behind you as well. We want to see what we can do with you. And that's where building happens. That's where collaboration happens. And that's where like the CPMI group from the BIS also happens. Listen closely to this video. And do I even need to remind you of the AMM that recently just launched on the XRP ledger? And although, yes, there was a problem with it, they're fixing it. It's going to be fixed. The AMM on XRP on the XRP ledger will be extremely successful. It will put XRP into a very, very liquid standpoint, and it will also make the XRP ledger extremely liquid as well. And this is where we really look at a third-party currency that has sufficient liquidity for cross-border payments as well.
With all that in mind, how do we deal with this issue of exchange rates and interoperability? How do we get these digital currencies to really just talk to each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when we talk about interoperability, we can see it at least in three different levels. So the first level is how we manage domestic interoperability. So how we generate this digital currency solution and make this speak with the other things that are out there in a little bit in the idea of generating a platform so that everyone can connect to that platform and take advantage of the huge network externalities that we can get out of there. The second level is how do we manage cross-border transactions, even within the same currency. And that presents a certain level of challenges there. But when we talk about cross-currency and cross-border, then we face a completely difficult and different environment. And we can see three dimensions here. One is the technical dimension, so how we manage to get a system that speaks in a certain cryptographic language to speak with another that speaks another slightly different language. So that is one level of complexity. We need to get the technologies to speak to each other. The messaging element is fundamental. The second dimension, which is much more complicated to solve, so that one, the first one was the easy one, okay? And there is a lot of money that is being put in terms of trying to solve these technical issues of interoperability. Now, the second one is more complicated. It has to do with liquidity. So imagine that you have a pair of currencies for which there is not a complementary demand. You need to go and search for a third-party currency in order to make this settlement actually happen. And this really complicates things. So we need to put pieces of technology that can make more efficiency this use of liquidity so that more transactions can be settled. The third dimension, which is even more difficult than the previous one, is how do we manage to get homogeneity in terms of the policy requirements on different countries. And this becomes even more complicated when we think about, for example, AML-CFT and principles-based policies, and when we think about risk-based policies. We can code things that are very clearly stated, but when we're talking about principles-based regulation, this thing becomes really complicated, especially in an environment, as Tom said, in which 110 nations might have 110 different ways of looking at this. So we need work in these three dimensions: technology, liquidity, and also, and more importantly, probably in the policy side of things. Think about AML-CFT, but also think about privacy. Different countries have very different views on this, no?
And there you guys have it from the BIS. He really kind of just summarized exactly what I said. You have all of these pieces that are building out this entire new system. It's not just going to be Ripple, obviously, but there's going to be multiple winners here. And the largest ones will be those utility projects. This is why I always say, what's actually happening here is not replacing anyone. We're not trying to sit here and say, hey, Swift is trying to kill XRP. Did they, were they successful in doing that because they just replaced it with the CBDC platform? Guys, it's ridiculous. What's really happening here is collaboration, and it's all specific pieces for this new financial system. So the BIS already told you this. The elites are telling you what's actually happening, what's coming. This is a big deal. Focus on the much larger move happening here. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on. If you guys want more free content, you guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, this has been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.